Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our first MBN webinar for 2021. I'd like to actually thank certainly the panel speakers for being with us this afternoon, and all the MBN members and friends that are also actually attending this webinar. Our panel speakers have all been in the manufacturing sector for many years. I welcome Martin Hignett, who's the CEO of Trelleborg, whose origins go back to 1961 and is therefore celebrating its 60th anniversary. Congratulations, Martin. And it used to actually operate under the style of Doughty Malta Limited, and is probably the oldest foreign-owned company here in Malta. Marisa Xuereb, who's also been in manufacturing for quite some time, and she is also the CEO of Raesch Quarz Malta Limited, and is deputy president of the Chamber of Commerce. Also with us is Anton Borg, who is a qualified accountant, and to my knowledge has been in manufacturing for around 30 years. And he's also a former president of the Chamber of Commerce. And last but by no means least is Martin Galea, who's also a chartered accountant, and his family company, Joinwell Limited, has been in existence, I believe, since around 1947. So welcome all, and let's get started with my first question. When government announced a lockdown in Malta in March 2020, did any of you set up a crisis team within your organization to ensure the safety of employees and yet keeping yourself going? Marisa, can I start off with you?
Thank you. Good afternoon. So the company I run employs 45 people. So this is a small team. And you could say the COVID team was the entire 45, in the sense that when you have such a small team, you really need to have all hands on deck. What was clear to us from the beginning was that it was very, very important that the government takes a stand that manufacturing will be treated like an essential service, in the sense that we do not have any interruptions in operations, because as you know, in manufacturing, if you're part of a supply chain and you fail to deliver, you don't lose just that order, you probably lose the next few as well, because the order will go to your competitor. And therefore, we were very proactive in installing measures to have social distancing, to have hand sanitizers everywhere, to have multiple shifts. I mean, we hadn't worked with shifts for about 2 years. We were on a single shift because we invested in more equipment, because we were finding that the local workforce prefers to have a day shift rather than to work over 3 shifts. And we produce quartz glass components that require a lot of skill. So for us, it was not an option to tap into third country nationals, because we needed people to be with us for many years for our business to be sustainable. So we had opted to go on 1 shift, but when the COVID pandemic struck, we had to have multiple shifts to ensure continuity of supply. But we found a lot of cooperation from the workers, and also from our suppliers and our logistics agents. One of the initial fears was that we would have problems with importing materials and with exporting. There were issues, but they were handled very well by our contractors. So the early stage of the pandemic was actually quite smooth, and because everyone else was on lockdown, we felt safer.
Thank you. Martin, can I ask you, because you employ close to 500 people?
Yes, we have about 530 people on site, if you include the contractors. Our situation is quite interesting because we have a lot of customers in China. And of course, this thing hit first in China, so we were watching it very closely to see what impact it would actually have on our customers, etc. So it wasn't for us just something which is over there, if you know what I mean. When it then started coming across and it came into Europe first and hit Italy, We actually set up a team immediately. To be honest, it was my direct reports because everyone was involved. And we tried to stay ahead of the curve. So we immediately introduced the masks. We had the screens between all the people where we could spread them apart and all the rest of it. One of the problems of being ahead of the curve is we are unionized, and therefore in some cases the unions complained. Because, for example, one of the first things I did was close the canteen, and I said it's a takeaway service only, and people have to eat outside. And the unions complained, and in fact we ended up having a union meeting, but the day of the union meeting, the government did the same thing on all the restaurants. So they actually, it was a very short meeting. So we found ourselves in that situation all the way through. On day one, we introduced the temperature measurement. At the gate, anyone coming in had to be temperature measured. How effective that was, I'm not sure, but what it did do is it gave people an element of confidence in the management and in terms of what we were actually doing. And they could see that we were taking this very seriously. Right from the top, everybody wore masks. And to be honest, we never had a problem from that sort of side. And we managed to get through for a very long time without actually our first case. So we were quite lucky from that sort of side. But as I said, we were looking at it very much, watching it come across from China into Italy. We had a lot of problems with Italy. I mean, I don't know, you've got probably further questions. So I just cover your first one and I'll come back later on. So yes, we set up a team and we tried to get ahead of the curve.
Okay, thank you very much. Anton Borg. Anton's company, I think, employs around 100 people. Anton?
Right. We actually employ about 120 people, and like Marisa's situation, we are not a large company where we actually set up a crisis team. However, we did have specific board meetings between the executive board members only to see what measures we can take. Like Martin, of course, we had the temperature taken of everyone, but again, like I agree with Martin, how effective that is questionable. Particularly, you know, someone can take some paracetamol or something and they're fine to go into the front door, but doesn't mean that they're not running a fever. The other measures we took, for example, were spreading clusters. For example, where we have manual workers working around the table, we spread them out and created a social distance to try and avoid contamination as much as possible. But as I said, we did not set up a crisis team, or you can say that the executive directors acted as the crisis team. But that was what the measures that we took. And there were, of course, other measures like the administration and middle management were all working from home for the first 10 weeks. But, you know, it's not exactly the same as working being present at work, and we had to revisit that decision, and we all came back to work with social distancing. Everybody had to wear masks or visors. The visors were eventually discarded and we all went for masks on the advice of the health authorities. But those are the measures that our company took.
Thank you, Anton. Martin Galea.
Well, I think really if we had to go back to last March, you know, we'd be quite surprised how well or how fast companies adapted to this extraordinary sort of event. You know, we're going back to the Middle Ages, if you want, where there's a plague and everyone has to quarantine and to keep away from each other. So I think, like most companies, you know, we did set up this sort of emergency committee. You know, the board met every week. We started meeting online, obviously, like most other companies. And I think looking back, you know, we did move very fast. I think most companies moved very fast. I mean, this was a total shutdown. I don't think there has been such a disruption since World War II, you know, and you know, like every company, we those who could work from home had to go. We have a lot of face-to-face client meetings. This is on the importation or selling to domestic customers. So that was shut down. and all that, those staff had to work from home or take leave, although we didn't reduce their pay. And the manufacturing side just carried on, I wouldn't say as normal, but the production carried on as normal, but with all these safety measures in place, and they've been mentioned. I don't think I need to mention them again.
Thank you. With regard to, were there many changes in transportation due to COVID-19, particularly with measures affecting the import and export movements? Martin, can I start with you?
Yes, by all means. We don't actually bring much in because we're pretty self-sufficient on everything except the raw polymers and the ingredients that we actually use to make the rubber, because we mix and compound all the rubber here. But a lot of our raw rubber suppliers are based around Bergamo in Italy, which, if you remember, was the area that was completely locked down and everything else. And that caused us almighty problems. We were having to get special permissions from the Italian government to actually get trucks in and out of completely blocked off areas to be able to get in there, because they were still working in their factories, but nobody was allowed in and out without special government permissions. So that was complicated. Probably my single biggest area of problem, though, was technicians. We'd recently just won a lot of new business and we were installing new machinery. All the machines turned up, but none of the technicians to actually do the installations came. So we were stuck there. We had customers basically very worried about us not being able to meet launch dates and everything else. So we were trying to do commissioning using our own maintenance teams over video, which then came into a new set of problems, which is the manufacturers were saying, well, the guarantee isn't valid because we haven't done the installation. So that in turn caused another set of problems. So I would say those are the sorts of things where we had a lot of problem with, trying to get technicians and people into Malta, and a certain amount of the deliveries from raw material supplies. Getting our product out wasn't too bad, but of course all the planes stopped flying. Most of my product, or a lot of my product going to China and to States, goes by air. And so yes, you've still got the DHLs, but you've lost a massive amount of transportation, which previously went in the holds of all the aircraft of the people flying above. So we had lots of problems with logistics and trying to get flights. States was a nightmare, trying to get stuff to the States. As you can imagine, there's no transport, and it still is a problem today. It's added a week to all logistics going to the States. So it's been very interesting.
Thank you, Martin. What about Martin Galea? Martin?
Well, we get some of the stuff from Germany and some from Italy, and mainly Europe. And I think for about 2 or 3 months we didn't get any shipments, which wasn't so bad because a lot of the customers didn't want their furniture installed anyway. So sort of it was back to back, and we didn't really have particular problems. Obviously, the ones which were delayed tended to be the ones which people wanted the stuff urgently, and that sort of problem. But nothing extraordinary, I would say.
Okay, Marisa?
Yes, what we experienced was a part of our production goes into medical and air and water disinfection. So as you can imagine, when the pandemic hit Europe, demand for these kind of products surged overnight. And we supply, and most of our customers are actually located in Europe. So we had kind of the toilet paper run that there was at the supermarkets happening at our factory, with people wanting to buy more and overnight and all this. And of course, this required much more material coming in. So there were a few of those challenges. On the export side, we started getting orders from branches of companies that we deal with, located in rather out-of-the-way places for us, like South Africa and Brazil, for example, that we do not normally supply, but that presumably were supplied from competitors in places like China. And at that point, China was, out of bounds. So we had to find a way of getting our goods to South Africa and Brazil at a time when it was challenging to get them to Europe. But I have to say, our logistics contractors were pretty creative on this side, and somehow we made it. So all in all, in terms of logistics, it didn't go too bad, I have to say. I mean, I expected it to be much harder than it actually was.
Thank you. Anton? Anton Borg?
Yeah, hi. We get most of our materials, well, one of the companies gets most of the materials from Europe, and I don't think we had any issues of transportation within Europe. However, particularly in the last 2 months, we have met up with quite a few problems to try to get material from China. Particularly the cost has shot up so much that it's almost prohibitive. Of course, if you have to get it from there, you have to get it from there, but still, in terms of transportation, if I had to limit myself, I would say, particularly felt in the last 2 months, transportation from China. What is more, what hit us more in terms of maybe falling under not transportation, but I think the biggest issue was the supply chain, where you are expecting certain deliveries for your requirements from a company that is suffering from COVID itself. So it's become quite unpredictable as to when you will actually receive your materials. And you know, when you're in the manufacturing sector, that is quite a problem to tackle. The supply chain, I think, has had, in some areas, has had some issues, which we had to somehow solve. But I think the transportation per se was not that big of an issue.
Okay, thank you. With regard to the government wage supplement and other incentives to combat this crisis, are you of the opinion that this was sufficient? If I can actually start off with Martin, Galea.
Yeah, well, you know, like I said earlier, we're sort of a two-tone company. We have a manufacturing aspect and an importation and retail. So, but we get the benefit for all the employees. So, whilst we got the benefit for some of the employees who are still in the manufacturing process and who continued working, others, you know, we really required it because they were doing nothing and they were at home. I think in our case it was adequate, possibly because of this, you know, that some people continued to work and got the benefit, and others remained at home. So I think it balanced out fairly well. Obviously, it was a small proportion of the total wage bill. So, but it did help us in a period of crisis. So, you know, obviously we were hit, but it did help us get through. I think on Printex, where they were all on manufacturing and the percentage was slightly lower, it was, you know, much more difficult, I think, there.
Marisa?
Well, as I said initially, we didn't require any support of the sort. We actually had the opposite problem, that we couldn't cope with the demand. Then over the summer months, our customers started realizing that they have overstocked. So we had a very slow summer. And during this time, we were seeing that we could actually have a very slow autumn as well. So during the summer months, we used up a lot of leave because during the previous months, they hadn't taken any vacation leave to be able to cope with the demand. And then we arranged for training for our employees for the 5th day for the last quarter of the year. And this was one of the good things that came out of COVID, because obviously the most affected would be the direct employees, the ones who are typically early school leavers. And they benefited from a day of training every week in IT skilling, which I'm sure is an investment, you know, not just related to their job, because as we go along, we try to digitize as much as possible of our processes, but also for their own personal skill set. So we didn't as such rely on the wage supplement because of the way things happened in our case. And I think there were many manufacturing companies who got hit later rather than in the initial stages, and these were not in a position to tap into the wage supplement when it was issued. But I think in general, the wage supplement has enabled the country to maintain the level of employment that it has been able to maintain, at least on paper. There is a worrying side to this, in my mind, that we have to make sure now that the jobs that people are attached to are actually real jobs that they are able to be able to take up again in the near future. Not so much in manufacturing, because in manufacturing the hit was partial, even in areas where it was strong, but especially in sectors like tourism and retail, where you have people who haven't been to work for months. I think there are some serious concerns as we move forward.
Thank you. Anton?
Right, so we did not actually apply or get any COVID assistance from the government. Nothing at all, no postponement of NIs or whatever it is, and no bank assistance either. But however, if I had to put myself into a manufacturing company that did actually require this assistance, I have my doubts whether the wage supplement, for example, was particularly good for the manufacturing sector. It may be good for example, retail sector, where it's, you know, like a shop and you got employees and part of the wages being paid for or assisted by the government COVID assistance. However, a manufacturing company where work has gone down, the amount of fixed overheads that still has to be paid, I don't think the wage COVID of 800, the assistance of 800 would be enough. I think for the manufacturing sector, there should be, and there had to be, more specific assistance, like assistance in the wage, in the energy costs, for example, or more specific manufacturing assistance. If a manufacturing company turnover has gone down drastically, it's unlikely that it can survive because it's getting part of the wages. They still have to pay the rest for a very long time. I think when it comes to manufacturing, this needs to be revisited, and maybe more specific assistance needs to be introduced. Moreover, now that the wage supplement has been revised to reflect the reduction in turnover, that could apply in some instances, but not in all cases, particularly manufacturing. Manufacturing has a lot of fixed overheads. Nobody is helping with the rent, with the other fixed overheads. 800 euros per employee is not much if you don't have any work at all.
Thank you, Anton. I'll come back to you on that. Martin Hignett.
We learned a lot during the last recession. And during the last recession, I would say it hit us far, far worse than what we actually saw last year. We dramatically reduced our workforce. Then when the volumes picked up very rapidly, we had a nightmare trying to actually catch back up again. It also severely damaged our reputation with the university, with the young graduates, and all the rest of it, because we'd released people. So I desperately did not want to have to do that. We did use the various schemes. We also used some training schemes. Malta Enterprise were absolutely fantastic in supporting us. Anything that they could find, they actually helped us with. But we were also very lucky. We're about 80% automotive, 20% niche industrial markets. 19 was not a good year for us, the second half, especially in automotive, and it was very low. So we had actually slowly reduced our headcount down as people left. We didn't replace them. So we went into 2020 with basically not enough people. So when it hit, it actually wasn't as bad as it could have been. The other thing is that the 20% that we have, which is not automotive, there's a bit of medical where we actually make O-rings for medical testing kits, including COVID for hospitals, which went crazy. But most importantly, we have a big chunk of our business, which is for the silicon chip industry in Korea, right? Samsung, basically. And that went skywards because everybody wanted a network card, everybody wanted a computer, everybody wanted a laptop, and all the rest of it. So I actually at one stage, probably after about, I don't know, March, April, maybe, yeah, probably about April time, I had, normally that sector will be about 15% of my turnover. I richly reallocated everything I could, took every tool I had, got it onto all the automotive presses. Nearly half of my business was actually working for the silicon chip industry. And that carried right the way through the summer. So it allowed me to compensate for a certain amount of the automotive that died off. Also, when automotive stopped, it stopped very, very quickly. Literally overnight, they shut the factories, but they hadn't shut all their orders. So in automotive, you tend to get 3 months order book. And so what I did is, as soon as I heard the factories were shut, much to the annoyance of my sales teams, I actually stopped delivering, because I said, there is no point me delivering into a warehouse and you end up with overstocking over the summer, right? So I literally stopped deliveries as soon as I heard the customers were closed. And I refocused all my effort actually into the sectors that were working.
Wow.
That allowed us to carry on through with really only about a sort of 20, maximum 30% down. And because my staff was a little bit low anyway, we managed to sort of limp our way through the summer, and with the assistance from Malta Enterprise, and we managed to keep going, obviously saving whatever we could. And then as we came out of the summer in about August time, the world woke up, and all the automotive companies started manufacturing again. They had run all their stocks down, and they were just chronically low, and they just started putting orders on, which are crazy. I have full order books out till March, April. I have an order book level at the moment, which I have never seen before. I mean, normally is around 6 million. It's currently around 12 million. And this is while they try and catch up. Now, I fully appreciate it's a catch-up phase. In the meantime, most people have got their laptops, so that's come back down to normal. So now we're in a state where we're back to some sort of normality, although we are working 7 days a week, flat out, to restock the whole supply chains. Once we get to about April, we'll have to see if people are still going to buy cars. The market has gone down, and we'll have to see. I mean, my sales last year, in the middle of the year, I was about 30% down. By the end of the year, I was only 5% down on the year before, which is remarkable.
Very good.
We actually managed to do a better EBIT than the previous year through all the savings and everything else that we did. And that was despite the disruption. So we had a lot of luck. But I would also say there have been a lot of lessons learned from the economic recession in sort of, 9, 10, 11. We made a few mistakes then, and we learned from those, and we tried to do a bit better this time around.
Okay, thank you, Martin. If I may go on to the next question, which is really from David Walsh, Chairman of MBN UK. And he's asking, has anything come out of the COVID experience that you would say is actually positive? Who'd like to go first?
Well, I can go first if you wish. I think a lot of positive has come out. For one thing, we've realized how important it is to be flexible. I mean, the year was characterized by a lot of uncertainty. So we could kind of draw scenarios and we say there's a possibility that this, and this happens in the next quarter, but we could never be sure until the quarter actually, until we're actually in the quarter and seeing the order intake and so on. And we learned how important it is to be flexible, to have the right set of people on board, and to have, as Martin was hinting at, a finger in different industries. The reason why we could weather the storm reasonably well is that we had a portion in medical, we had a portion in air disinfection, we had a portion in automotive that did really badly, of course. We had a portion in steel production that did badly. We had a portion in stage and studio lighting. You can imagine what happened there. We didn't sell a single stage lamp, So, but having this broad spread of markets helps a lot. We also learned how important it is to have really strong customers on the market, because I have to say that even in those industries that were badly hit, like stage and studio lighting, because the customers we have are well established in the industry, they survived. And now their orders are coming back in. Whereas we are aware that a lot of smaller, weaker companies in the industry have revved up. So I think it's important to invest in a customer base that is broad, and that includes customers that are market leaders in their field, that will be the last one standing, because this gives you a more sustainable business model even when these unexpected things happen.
Thank you. Marisa, who'd like to go next?
I can go if you want next. I agree a lot with what Marisa has said, but I think there are other advantages that we've learned from COVID, and we've also enjoyed from COVID, and that is how to do your marketing in a different manner. Because I, for one, would have never imagined that I can do the same level of sales sitting behind my desk. Having said that, I don't want to eliminate the face-to-face meetings completely. But if I used to visit a client maybe 2 or 3 times abroad a year, I probably can go down to 1 time a year when all this is over. And I think what has helped is that the clients themselves are doing their business in the same manner. So everybody seems to be understanding that, you know, the Zoom and the Teams,
Microsoft Team, yeah.
yeah, they are all very useful tools. Another advantage, and I think Martin mentioned this very, very slightly, is when you revisit all your costs again. And you see that sometimes you realize that because of COVID, you're doing something one way now that can easily continue even after COVID, which is where there's a cost saving. So I think there has been an actual positive experience coming out of COVID. Of course, overall, it's not, if you had to put them on a weighing scale, I'd say there's more negative than positive, but overall, something has come right out of this.
Okay. Martin Galea.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously agree with all what was said before. You know, we had to look at the way we do things. We needed to look at our markets, cut our costs. I think agility was the key word, how fast you were able to change. Perhaps something which hasn't yet been mentioned was loyalty of you to the staff, of the company to the staff, and of the staff to the company. You know, those who could, you know, took extraordinary efforts to keep the staff on board, and perhaps not have cut in wages. You know, they did see a sort of a light at the end of the tunnel, and they were able to do this. And I think that was appreciated by many of the staff. You know, these were extraordinary times, and the easiest thing would have been to close down. Obviously, in some industries like tourism, it's absolutely not possible. But in some, they were able to sort of limp forward, and I think that was appreciated both sides.
Okay, Martin Hignett.
Pros and cons. I would say yes, there are some things. I used to travel pretty much every other week, and we used to do a lot of traveling, I think, as my management team and many other people. And I think we've learned that a lot of that was unnecessary. Having said that, I think the Teams or the Zoom is very good. There is less people now using the phone. Now, when you actually call someone, you automatically put the video on and you actually talk to them. And so I would say in some respects, there's actually more communication, but it tends to be very much, in a way, more formalized. I used to go up to Stuttgart, which is where our head office is, and we have a lot of the sales teams there and all the rest of it. And I used to go up once a month, and I'd go up for maybe 1-2 hour meeting, but I would actually go for 2 days, and I would have back-to-back meetings, a lot of which was just popping into somebody's office, asking them, you know, what problems do they have today, and this, and can we help, and this and that. That has disappeared. And therefore, I think there's a certain amount of this sort of COVID disconnection with some of your customers. We also used to have customers coming here on a weekly basis from all over the world. And not having that means that we're missing the voice of the customer actually in the factory and with my engineering teams and all the rest of it. So although at the time they used to complain about it, I think they all miss it now because it isn't really quite the same thing. You do get a lot of value for taking them out to dinner and actually just sort of getting to know them a bit better. You know, shooting the breeze can actually help when you're working on a difficult project, etc. So I think there's some pros and cons. On balance, I think when we go back again, we'll make some savings on travel. We will certainly go back to having travel. But I'm hoping that some of the good things that come out will actually keep going. Thank you.
I mean, coming to my next question, I mean, overall, if I can just put it in general terms, what was the overall reduction in your turnover? I mean, was it a reasonable percentage overall?
For us, it was 10% overall.
Okay, that's very good.
At the peak of the crisis. A little bit more in the autumn quarter. That's where we really hit our bottom, you know.
Yeah.
So in that quarter, it would have been in the region of 25%. But for the whole financial year, which in our case runs from October to September, so this was a little bit in our favor, it was 10%. So kind of the best period is spread over 2 financial years as it happens. So this is not too bad. There was one question that came in directed at me regarding whether we pivoted our experience on lighting to create products for the domestic market. We are part of a supply chain in special lighting. So we produce the quartz glass part that is used in special lighting, which is typically not the kind of LED lighting that is used in households. So we are not directly in the end market. We depend a lot on our customers as to where our components end up in the end market there. But there have been efforts on our customer side to try to diversify their portfolio, yes, and we've been very supportive in this in terms of development work to try to move in different directions, you know, things like greenhouse lighting, for example, which we saw picking up a little bit more this year and based on similar technology to stage and studio. So there were some interesting R&D developments that we could cooperate in with our customers, but not for the domestic market. I mean, the domestic market for a specialized producer is very, very, very small. So you have to think on an international scale to have feasible projects in terms of development.
Sorry, Martin or Anton?
I'll speak. As I said earlier on, I mean, our worst period was April, May. We were about 20% down, but we caught up by the end of the year. In the end, we were only 5% down, which is remarkable, to be honest.
Very good. Anton Borg?
Yeah, well, our turnover was only a couple of percentages down from 2019. But because of the cost savings that came about, either for obvious reasons through COVID, like the traveling expense, or because you actually look around and see what savings you can do, we had, again, a few percentage in our EBITDA. Having said that, that's not bad. What everyone tells us, it's not bad for a COVID year. However, when you look at our specific situation, we had invested a lot of money in 2019 on new machinery that should have given us a much better result. Now, we didn't do that result, but however, we didn't reduce our EBITDA. So it's sort of like a bittersweet result. And it's okay because you were slightly better in your EBITDA and your results over 2019, but it wasn't certainly what we had budgeted for, what we had forecast.
That's very good. Martin, Galea?
Well, we have a bit of a mixed bag. Obviously, because customers couldn't come to the showrooms to buy their furniture, we had the total shutdown period. The incoming orders had completely dried up. So our general manager immediately sort of focused on contract work and getting new bespoke business in for the manufacturing side. And he was pretty successful in that. So once we had a dip in the orders incoming on the domestic imported furniture, we increased on the contract. However, this sort of doesn't pan out in the results for the year, because what happens in furniture is that there is quite a time delay between importing the order of the furniture and its installation on both contract and so time lost is lost if you don't if you have 2 months where you can't deliver furniture, that time is lost and then everything backs up. So we had quite big issues with logistics and trying to cram deliveries in. And so on the sales side, we ended up lower, whereas on orders we were slightly lower, but not too bad. Looking forward though, which I think is the $1 million question, I don't know how it will hold up. Is there, going to be sort of a soft market in the future for furniture and domestic items, or will it sort of carry on perhaps to 2019 levels? I think that's what we're looking at.
Yeah. In fact, actually, Martin Galea, I was going to actually ask you a specific question, because you're more or less the only one of the 4 panelists that are completely dependent on the local market. And my question was, did you have more sales during the whole year as opposed to your usual, let's say, 2 sales that you have during the year?
No, because our sales are normally on deliveries. Yeah. So in the period of the shutdown and for a bit of a period thereafter, as people were still sort of a bit worried about people coming into their house to install furniture, we lost quite a window of installations for 3-4 months. And that's very difficult to recover because we have a limited amount of installers. We were able to use those installers on other production jobs, so sort of their time wasn't lost. But on the actual deliveries, on sales, we did lose out. So we were down on the year. But that was to expect. It wasn't a terrible blow.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Martin. My next question is, did all of you take advantage of the MDB COVID-19 guarantee scheme?
No.
Okay.
Neither did we.
Yep.
No.
Okay. Right. I'm just, I think there are some questions coming in. If I may, hold on. I've got a question here. What manufacturing, being fairly hands-on activity, did the industry suffer more positive COVID illness than other sectors?
I don't think so. I mean, the information that we have as the chamber from public health is that actually manufacturing handled the contagion side of the story pretty well. And I'm not surprised about this because manufacturing work environments tend to be pretty controlled environments. So people have their own workspace. There is a lot of discipline in terms of starting times and entries and exits. So although they are people intense environments, a little bit like schools, if you like, it's much easier to introduce measures and to have people abide by them. I mean, from our own experience, 45 people, 6 in the office, it's much more difficult to get the office people to comply with the distancing and with the wearing a mask than the people who are on the floor. And I think this also reflects a number of cases. I think also a lot of manufacturers were extremely vigilant and did not wait, for example, for contact tracing to contact them to take action if they had a suspected case. Everybody had his own protocol and took, decisions in advance to preempt the possibility of having a contagion within the factory, because we are all ultimately very concerned about business continuity. I think this is key, So you'd rather have some people out for nothing than risk having contagion within the plant.
Okay, thank you, Marisa. Martin?
Joe,
Okay.
I just want to reinforce, I think, what Martin was saying earlier, because I do have the same sort of viewpoint that although, you do much more on online now, through Zoom or Teams or whatever, and everything is much more efficient and you're saving time, a lot of time, you're saving a lot of expense. I think the bond with your either supplier or your customer, I think has been affected, is being affected quite adversely. We think it's okay, but really it's a much colder relationship. And I think, you know, we neglect travel at our peril. Perhaps we don't need to do it as often as Martin said, but I think, you know, you tend when you're on a Zoom just to discuss the business at hand, whereas when you do travel, you know, you go out to dinner, you discuss football or whatever other things, which sort of makes the human element more important. And you know, a surprising lot of business is done, possibly partly due to the human element.
Okay, Martin Hignett.
I would actually like to add to what Martin's saying. I've been doing a lot of reading about how to get the most out of virtual conversations, etc. I think one of the problems with the Zoom and the Teams and all the rest of it is it's very precise. It starts at exactly a time, and it finishes exactly a time, and people are terribly efficient. It's the only time I've ever seen everyone turn up on time for meetings in Malta. I mean, you know what it's like, you know, the chamber meetings or whatever else, you know, everyone wanders in over the sort of half hour after the time and all the rest of it. Whereas on a Zoom call, everyone turns there exactly right. And so you tend to sort of get straight into it and there's none of the chit chat. The chit chat is very important. And if you read any of the sort of psychologists, you know, documents and all the rest of it, they're saying what you should do is actually make an effort in your first 10 minutes of a virtual call to have the chit chat. You know, talk about the football, talk about whatever, your holiday, well, non-holidays, but actually do that and make a conscious effort to do it because it is actually important. So that's on the virtual side. With my team here and actually following up with that, we have not really done homeworking. My team have actually preferred to wear the mask, be careful, distancing and everything else, sanitizers everywhere, etc., but come to work. Because we have a lot of informal meetings. I have very few formal meetings, just, you know, a few a month. But everything else is like around the coffee machine, you're popping into someone's office and all that kind of stuff. And that's how we like to do business. That disappears as soon as you're sat in a room at home and you're literally holding a virtual call and it becomes very formal and all the rest of it. So I would fully support and agree with what you're saying. And I'd recommend people who are doing the virtual stuff, do try and make time at the beginning of the call to have the little bit of the chit chat. Otherwise, we end up being a little bit like robots, you know, going from one call to the next. I don't know if you guys have felt that, but the way, you know, your diary suddenly gets filled and you find you're rushing from one call to the next, to the next, to the next. I mean, it's a bloody nightmare. It used to be quite nice to have the time to walk over to an office or walk to this, that, and the other. You don't have that thinking time anymore.
Yes.
Anyway, that's just my view. Thank you.
Anton?
In respect to the employees, we did have a couple of scares when we thought that we might need to close down, and we had to take, of course, action as fast as possible with respect to testing and people staying at home. But I think overall, it didn't really affect our business that much in terms of illness of COVID by the employees. So that's quite in agreement with what Marisa was saying. With respect to this personal relationship, as I said, if we used to visit a client 3 times, we might, after all this, visit them once. But I agree, today, because I haven't seen them for all of last year, I'm very eager to go and visit my clients because too long time has passed just chatting over Zoom or whatever, and you feel the need to go and visit them. Now, there could be a little bit of just chit-chat over there, but that personal relationship must be kept alive all the time.
Agreed. Thank you, Anton. I do actually have a question. Basically, the question is, Brexit is done irrespective of anyone's views, for or against, we must all move forward. Given the purpose of the MBN has always been to promote more UK/Malta and third country trade, what more can the MBN do or can be done generally to further this cause in the manufacturing field? Anyone would like to answer that? I mean, basically, Anton, you were actually referring that obviously I think that separate incentives should be dedicated to the manufacturer.
The issue with Brexit is we had this discussion when Brexit came up the first time, and people were saying, well, we're part of the Commonwealth and we should try to do some special arrangement with Britain. It actually cannot be done because we are part of the EU. And we can never have a separate free trade agreement with Britain, for example. We are bound by EU rules. Now, what else can be done? What can be done now could have been done before Brexit came around. If there was any promotion of Britain-Malta trade, it could have been done before. Brexit, what Brexit has done is that there is a possibility of introducing some tariffs, although that seems to have disappeared now. So really, although Brexit came around, your relationship with your British customer hasn't changed much. Now, first of all, I have to say that we have very, very small percentage of trade with Britain. I have to say that. But what can the business network do to help promote this business? I really don't think there's much more than what could have been done before Brexit came around.
Okay. Anyone would like to take on that particular question? Okay, if
I can comment, if I may, Joseph, what we've noticed with regards to our few customers in the UK, because it's not one of our main markets, they've become a little bit more anxious, a little bit more uneasy, and most of them have come with kind of more elaborate conditions of supply agreements than they used to have previously, stating that any other ancillary costs are included in the price, and this covers a guarantee for a lot of things that before we never even stopped to think about because we were within the same economic zone. But on the side of our UK customers, there is this fear that something that they buy from us might be subject to some sort of tariff now, and they try their best to insure themselves against the possibility of having to pay that themselves. So this is what we are finding on the ground at the moment.
Okay, if I may, actually, because we're coming up to the end of the hour of this webinar, can I just ask any of the panel speakers if there's anything particularly that they would like to actually mention, and then I'll have my closing remarks.
I think, Joseph, one thing that I really want to get across as a message that I'm saying mostly not as a manufacturer, but through Chamber. Manufacturing in Malta was previously not given as much mention and as much attention as is being done now. So this COVID has been a little bit of a Cinderella story for manufacturing. We've had 10 to 20 years of so many other industries are so much more attractive, so much more profitable, you know, so much more the future, so much more growth areas. And then when the storm hit, it was the sector that seemed to hold itself together best.
Yes.
And I think this is a moment that we need to exploit as a manufacturing industry, because finally we are coming to realize as a country that no matter how much business you develop in all sorts of other areas, manufacturing remains a pillar of strength in all developed economies.
Yeah.
And we need to capitalize on this moment.
What I was going to add is that the Chamber, particularly representing the employer organization, has done a lot of work on finding out how the manufacturing sector has been hit with COVID and the future after COVID and all of that, and has also started to mention manufacturing specific assistance. And I think the Chamber needs to continue to push for this particular assistance, because, as I said, a wage supplement may not necessarily be sufficient for manufacturing companies, not for everyone. And we have to, I think, emphasize here that not all manufacturing companies are the same. Not all manufacturing companies operate in the sector that they can survive. Others cannot survive. So I think assistance from government need to be a little bit more focused. That is the comment I would like to add.
Thank you, Anton. The two Martins, Martin Galea, Martin.
Well, you know, I don't want to get the flags out yet. I think, you know, although, you know, we might be seeing the light at the end of the tunnel as far as COVID-19 is concerned, I think the economic impacts will be with us for quite a long time. I mean, we know that certain industries will be hit very badly, and they are big employers. And I think perhaps we've been cushioned by governments all around the world who have been sort of rushing out these extraordinary assistance programs. And these will dry up as you know, the deficits pile up. And ultimately, you know, the real economic impact might be felt a bit further down the road. So, you know, we have to continue to be resilient. We have to continue to be agile. We have to look at all the new markets and the efficiencies we need to make. But I think perhaps I'm sounding a bit pessimistic, which I'm trying not to be. You know, we have some way to go.
Okay, thank you. Martin, Hignett.
I think it's going to be a bit of a race against time between sort of second lockdowns and vaccines, etc. If I want to finish on a positive, I'm seeing a lot less hesitancy towards the vaccine that maybe I saw 6 months ago. Many more people now seem to be positive towards, happy to have it and all the rest of it. So I'm hoping that actually we'll be able to move into the next stage fairly quickly. I'm obviously, as a business, I'm a bit worried what happens once all my customers have restocked. Is the demand actually going to be there? But we'll have to see. I'll find that out probably around the middle of the year. But hopefully by then, the vaccine should be having a bit of an impact. There will be quite a few people who've already had COVID, so in which case they're going to have some sort of protection. Plus also you're going to have people who've had the vaccine. So hopefully it'll then start to get back to some sort of normality. That's the hopeful side.
Okay. Thank you very much, Martin. If I can actually conclude, I mean, obviously manufacturing is very close to my heart because I was actually my former life president of the Federation of Industry on 2 occasions in 1990 and 91, and again between 2000 and 2003. But in actual fact, I think what Marisa also indicated, and it's also important, is manufacturing was the backbone of Malta's economy, certainly in the 60s and the 70s. And in actual fact, it employed, I think, more people then because of the textile industry and everything else. But in actual fact, I'd like to say that in the last 10 to 15 years, really, the manufacturing base in Malta has stood to what it is. I mean, its percentage in relation to GDP has gone down as a result of other economic activities having gone up. But in actual fact, the actual amount of exports from Malta has more or less remained at the same level, if not strengthened. I think one of the things that, or some of the things that have actually come out from today's webinar is obviously it's important to have a strong relationship with customers. So agreed that I would think once the opportunity of having face-to-face meetings, they'll come about again, because I think it is important to have that sort of a relationship. You might not visit a particular customer as often as you used to, but it's important to actually do so. Also, Marisa pointed out actually in investing in customer base. And again, I would agree with that, that you need to actually have a strong relationship with your suppliers as well as your customers. And Martin Galea also mentioned this too. I think there has been a revisit on your costs. So there has an element of cost savings and your ways of operating today, which is really a good part. Obviously, again, it's important that you retain the human element side of it, be it with your staff and also your customers and suppliers. So all that is good. I think if we can be of any help in any way, just do let us know. In conclusion, I'd like to take this opportunity of really thanking our panel speakers. I'd like to thank Peter Grech of Brandwagon, who's organizing these webinars and sends out all of our e-circulars. And last but by no means least, the attendees for joining us this evening. Before concluding, I would inform you that our next webinar is being held on Thursday, the 18th of February from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. The title of this webinar will be COVID Shockwaves, Implications for the Maltese Economy. The moderator of this webinar will be David Valencia, who's a managing partner of PwC. Our lead speaker will be economist and chairman of the Bank of Valletta, Dr. Gordon Cordina. And I think David Xuereb, president of the Chamber of Commerce, will also be participating in this webinar. And then in March, we shall be having another webinar on the banking industry in Malta. So I'd like to thank you all for attending this webinar, and I wish you all a very good evening. Thank you all.